Welcome back, guys. Without wasting time, let's move straight to what we have. So right here, I am marking my darts. Yes, with the chalk. I'm doing what is called eye measurement. So I'm just trying to use my initiative to transfer the dart to the fabric. But if this is stressful, you can notch, okay? If this is stressful for you, it's even better to notch. So I'm going to use my scissors to notch. All you have to do is take note of the point where the dart leg ends, okay? So on that waistline, then you're going to trace onto the fabric the point where the dart begins, just like that. So when you take this to the sewing machine, it will be easy for you to know where the dart legs are. So you match up the darts and you sew up to the point where the dart should end too. So I'm doing the same thing to the bust dart as a side dart and taking note of where it stops also inside. So I'm going to take this to our sewing machine. But before then, let me notch my zipper allowance. I didn't notch that earlier. So it's very important you do all this so you know where to stop and where to start, okay, when you're sewing. So let's take this to the sewing machine and I'll come back to show you guys what we've done. Yeah, guys, and this is the outcome. I've sewn the darts and here it is. Can you see that fullness that it has given at the bust area? So this will give you a fit that you want. So even if you have excesses at the side, don't worry, you can still trim that later. And this is the back. If you iron this out, it's going to lay so smooth. Yes. So, and you can see the side seams also. So even if you have excesses later, we'll still trim that off. Still trim them off. So that's it for the darts. So the next thing now is to sew our flay for our sleeve. That's the cold shoulder sleeve we want to make. So I've cut the piece in two. Okay, I have the main fabric and the facing. So we're going to sew all around that at about ½ inch. Okay, seam allowance, ½ inch seam allowance. I've sewn that. Then we're still going back to the sewing machine to sew the inside curve. Yes, that inside curve. Now after sewing, we are going to notch that point we just sewed. That's the inside curve. I'm notching. So the notch will help the curve to relax because I am turning it out like this. So when I turn out, the notching will help the curve to relax. So like this. So I'll do the same thing to the other one. And I'll still turn out. So it does not matter whichever fabric you want to use for your lining. You can use ordinary lining, you can use your fabric to do your lining. Now here we are going to go back to the sewing machine and sew on top because we want to add elastic to this to that point, to that inside curve of our flay. Yes, we're going to add a ½ inch elastic. So make sure you sew about ½ inch so as to contain the elastic by the time we put it in. So I've done that. And with the help of my safety pin, we're going to pass the elastic into that ½ inch that we just sewed now. So depends. I really made mine tight. I took in a lot of elastic, like it was about 7 inches. You can make yours to be more than that so that it can flow very well, you know, to give you that nice drop, to give you that nice cold shoulder drop. So I've passed my elastic. So when you pass to the edge, pin it down. Okay, pin it down. Secure it with your pin so the elastic does not move. Then measure how much you want. So I measured about 7 inches on when the elastic is relaxed, okay, without being stretched, it's about 7 inches that I did. So you can make yours 8, you can make yours 9, depends on how much effect you want to add to that cold shoulder drop. So whichever you choose, no problem, it will work. So I made sure I secure that elastic so it doesn't move in. Okay, I secured it with a pin, then took it to my sewing machine and sew it down. So you want to sew that down, okay? Then when you're done with this, you're going to set it aside. And the next thing we're going to do now is to weave the edges, okay? If you have a weaving machine, you can weave the edges, like the side seam, the side edges, and so, okay, you can weave them. Then the zipper area, okay, just the side seam, the zipper area, you can weave them, because the neckline and the shoulder, that's the armhole, we're going to be facing them in with the facing that we have. So next now is to join our shoulder. We're going to join the shoulder for the main bodice, that's the main fabric. You're going to align the right side facing the right side, okay, you can see the right side facing right side. Then you're going to sew at the shoulder line. So after sewing, this is what we have. We're going to do the same thing to the facing. Okay, this is the main fabric. We're doing the same thing to the facing. Now on the facing, you still place it right side facing the right side, that's the back and the front. Then you go to the sewing machine and sew, and this is what we have here. So set this aside. We'll continue with the main bodice now. So I want to attach my flay for the sleeve, that's the cold shoulder sleeve we want to make. So I will do my shoulder drop and connect the flay, but make sure that the circle, that's that flay, does not touch your side seam, okay? Doesn't touch your side seam allowance, rather. Make sure it doesn't touch your side seam allowance. All right. So we'll come down 3 inches from the shoulder line. Then make sure the flay is facing right side to your fabric, okay? Then you pin that down. So do the same thing to the back. You come down by 3 inches, or by how many inches you want your shoulder to drop, okay, the cold shoulder to drop. Then you align your circle or your flay at that curve, pinning it down like I'm doing right now. So you pin it down that way. So this is, I'm just showing you the effect we're having already. So you do the same thing to the other side. So you can see I have excess around this point. I trimmed just any little excess you have, just trim it off. Well, make sure it's not going to affect your fabric, okay? So right here, I am going to do the same thing. Now I want to show you guys something. If you're finding it difficult to align that flay to your armhole, you can make a curve that suits that armhole curve, okay? So that's what I did on this other part, okay? So you can easily align with the curve, right? So whichever you do, you can still work. As long as you know how to handle this, it can work. So I'm pinning down again. Make sure it is right side to right side. So right side to right side, like so. You pin down. Okay. Then when we're done with this, you're going to bring your facing. You're going to bring the facing. Okay. You place it on top. Yes. Your flay will be inside, in between your main bodice and the facing. That's the main fabric and the facing. Now you're going to take this to your sewing machine and sew. You can pin it down first, okay? Then you're going to sew all the way around the armhole. So as you sew, you're including that area that you pinned on the flay, okay? You include it. So I've sewn mine and this is the result. Next, I'm going to notch. So you notch the armhole all around so as to ease up your seam there. Okay, to ease it out. Okay, when we're done with this, we're going to sew at the neckline. You know, we just sewed the armhole. The neckline now, we're going to sew the neckline. So to do this, you are going to tuck in, like you're going to sandwich that flay in between your facing and the main fabric. So make sure you tuck that flay inside so it does not get caught up in your seam. Okay, so make sure you push it in. You can see what I'm doing. I'm pushing it in very well. Then align my neckline properly. Okay, and align the neckline properly. You can pin that down. So align it properly. Make sure I don't have excesses. Okay, even if I have excess, let the excess come to that neckline area so that your armhole point should be flat. The armhole area should be flat. So you're going to do this all the way to the zipper seam. So after pinning down, we're going to take this to the sewing machine, but you must sew away from your zipper allowance. Okay, sew away from your zipper allowance. You're going to sew the neckline all the way. So here we have it. I've sewn it, and next we're going to notch. Notching is very, very important when it comes to curve, okay, because it's going to make that seam to relax. It will relax the seam. So after that, I'll take off my pins. Take off your pins. We're going to turn out. We're turning out. And to turn out, just put your hands inside. You can bring out your finger if your hands can't pass. Then put the fabric in between your fingers and turn it out. It's very, very easy to do. Then here we have it. Here we have it. This is turning out nice already. So I'm taking out all the pins, take them out, okay? And this is what we have. So this is a very clean inseam finishing that we're doing here. You can't see the seam on the shoulder, the armhole. No seams. Okay, no seam allowances there. Everything is inside. So next, we're going to close the sides. Yes, we're going to close the sides for the upper part. So to close the side, just make sure you bring the right side facing the right side. That's the main fabric facing the main fabric. Okay, so you know we have the facings. The facing is far shorter than the main fabric, right? So what I'm doing, I want to turn with my front. You can turn with your back, whichever, but it's usually advisable to turn. Let the back do the turning. I don't know how I explain that, but just place it, then turn out the front. I turned out my front. Okay, then I took that to my sewing machine and sewed it down and turned out. So if I turn out, I have a very clean finishing for the side at the armhole area. Can you see that? So everything is nicely finished, both at the armhole, the neckline, and the shoulder seam. Everywhere is nicely finished for the upper part. So I'm going to trim off. I have excesses here. I'll trim that off. You can see how nicely I smoothen that in. Okay, it's not even noticeable. And next, I'll just throw my tape on the dress to make sure I have my measurements correctly. So I'll see you in the next video where we'll talk about the shorts. All right.